So I am talking about, so in a way it is similar to what we just heard, stones and how stones can be either be animate, have spirits, or they can be representatives of something that used to have a spirit. And within the Torres Strait area, which is my background, then there are the three types of stones, which are ordinary stones. Most stones are just stones, rocks, or whatever. They could be used for work, or they could be stones that represent a totemic clan origin story or similar, or they could be stones that are used for magic, for power, and so on. And the words that you can see on the screen are in the first line. Kasakula Zakapakula is the Western and Central Torres Strait language. No Bakir, Dorge Bakir is the Eastern Torres Strait language. And Kasaston, Stomblawok is the Torres Strait Creole terms for these stones. So the area we are talking about is this, the Torres Strait cultural area to the left, and the southeast Papuan area to the west, which is Austronesian, of course, and further to the east from there is Vanuatu and so on. Oops. Now, where can we go from here? The Torres Strait cultural area, in a general historical point of view, is the westernmost part of Austronesian influence, even though Torres Strait itself, in that area, there are no Austronesian languages. But 2700 BP, there were Papuans bringing hook culture, Lapita pottery, and so on into Torres Strait area. At the bottom end of the Torres Strait cultural area, on the right, there is Lizard Island, and on this island there are very few stone arrangements which only exist elsewhere in Kitave, which is in the Trobriand Islands. Okay. So there has been, for a few thousand years, some Papuan Austronesian influence in the Torres Strait area, which also seems to include religion, the beliefs in stone spirits, and so on, as well as linguistic. Okay, so this is the area. The specific area we are talking about is this: Australia to the bottom, Papua New Guinea to the top, and Torres Strait in the middle. And so you will have an area which is on the cusp of Papua, Austronesian Papua, and Australia, with all the influences you can imagine coming into this area and leaving this area. Okay. So, Torres Strait cultural area centered on Torres Strait for trading, for canoes, for ochre from the south, for bird of paradise plumes and things from the north. The whole area is linked by totemic networks. So it doesn't matter if there are 10 languages in the area in 5 families, and these 5 families are literally not related to each other at all. And this is within a great area where there are about 11 language families that are completely unrelated, even though some may have been related and part of the area before the end of the last ice age, where people were pushed north and south because of the water coming in. Okay, so Lapita Austronesians from Southeast Papua around 2700 BP. They were, according to the folk stories that are remembered of this time, they were mainly male settlers, traders who married local women and settled, both Papuan women and Australian women. The middle islands, the southern islands of Torres Strait were at the time inhabited by Australians, Papuan Australians. Then maybe 1,800 to 1,200 BP, more influence from Southeast Papua. At this time, the whole area was undergoing a lot of movement, a lot of influx. Pottery making had lessened a bit, and then towards the end came back into prominence again. And then also in the Pacific, this was happening as well. So in the southeast Papua, around Port Moresby and around this area, there's evidence of people coming from the north side of Papua around into this part of Papua, and possibly even reaching as far as Australia. Kitave in the Trobriand Islands might have happened at this time, reaching Lizard Island. Okay, and then from about 700 BP before now, Western Austronesians, Macassans and so on, started visiting the area, and there is linguistic and cultural evidence of this. And then, last but not least, Christianity. Okay. Now, so, working stones, ordinary stones. There are many stones in this area. Many of the islands are like this. They have big rocks around them, and these rocks are very useful for things like if you catch a dugong, cutting it up. This is a stone that is important in a traditional clan story from Doan Island. However, the stone itself is just a working stone, nothing important. Then there are the stones that represent beings that have become stones, like to the left from Murray Island, there is Dao Tom, Tagai's canoe, and Kareg. Kareg was Tagai's younger brother. They are gods in the Central Pacific Polynesian sense. Tagai has very similar name to the god Tagaro and similar forms in Vanuatu and so on. To the right is just a story stone, which is Kaumain, looking out to see at his wife, Kamutnab, with the children. And he has a particular shape, which is his wife, once when she was very angry, he was a fat man, she cut his jowls off when she was very angry. And then she went out to the sea and became a stone. Okay, then we have stones that are puri stone, which are for making magic, basically. So there's the stone dugong and samar boigu, used for making dugong magic by Ganadi Toby, and Ganadi Toby's before his came down from his ancestors, and now it is in his son's hands. This stone does not come from Boigu, it came from Doan, a hill's rock. Then on Murray Island, there are the pumice figures, the puleb, which are inhabited by Madu, Madu being the messengers of the gods, and used for various things, fishing and so on. Okay, very quickly about what is interesting about Torres Strait is there are two languages, the Western Central language, which is 30% Australian, but a very strong Southeast Papuan and East Translate Papuan influence, but about 30% of the words are unclassified. Then Miriam Mir, which is Eastern language, which is clearly East Translate, but also is mixed. They are completely unrelated languages, but share the bulk of their core religious beliefs. The differences are mainly in surface cult differences and so on. The differences between the individual clans, totemic clans in the islands and Papua and Australia are greater than the differences between any of the groups, language groups. And these two languages share 40% of the vocabulary, and most loans went from the west to the east, and many are recorded as being gifts from the Western and Central Islanders to the east. So then there's the Zugub, Lapita post-Lapidal Austronesian influences. Zugub are roughly the equivalent of the Polynesian Atua in their function, in what they do, and so on, and becoming stars and constellations. You can see what they do on the screen. They also have the Madub, their messengers. They're also the Markai, the ancestral spirits. So when each one of us die, each islander dies, it's a general belief of the area. They go to the sky world, which is created by the Zugub, and where the totems live in the totemic territory. And they become the ancestral spirits, and which can be called on Earth. So the Madub and the Markai, their function is that they inhabit the stones that are used for magic. They also inhabit drums, canoes, and other things. There are also influences from Australia. and Papua, mutual influences going back untold centuries. Trade items from Australia, ochre, and so on. Most recent influences, sorry for the typo, have been from Torres Strait out, but earlier influences probably were coming in. Okay. So what is an Aadi stone? An Aadi stone is a stone which was a being in a sacred story. And that being then at the end of the story becomes a stone. And the stone is there permanently as the memorial for that person or that thing, because it can also be a canoe which has a spirit. However, the stone itself does not contain the spirit. It's a memorial, and the spirit itself goes to the totem territory in Kibukut, okay, which is the sky world. It's an interesting word in that could well be a loan word from Ireland, Southeast Asia, from Makassar or something, because there is this, the word Aadi itself has a legendary meaning and is very similar in meaning to Indonesian and so on, Aadi. One example of an Aadi is Kiba, Kasare clan totemic ancestor who lived in Papua, just north of Torres Strait. He, with his brothers, went down to between Boigu in Torres Strait and the Papuan coast. They went dugong hunting. They followed a dugong all the way down southwards in Torres Strait. They caught the dugong, and while doing this, there was the how to catch the dugong knowledge of this spread. And then they went back to Boigu. They created a couple of wells, and then they went back to the river in Papua, and then they became stones. They sank into the water and became stones under the river, sorry. Okay, and then there is another Aadi stone from the west, and this case is Tagai. Tagai is the chief Zugu god. He is the god that manages the harvest, fertility, the battle, the dry season, and things like this. His younger brother, Kareg Kang, he manages the northwest monsoon rains and so on. And this is a stone that is from a story in Murray Island of how Tagai, Kareg, and their crew eventually, Tagai sent all of his crew and finally Kareg up into the sky to become different stars and constellations. Kareg is Antares in Scorpio. Tagai himself is a very big constellation of Orion, and the Southern Cross, standing in their canoe, which is the Milky Way. Okay, so, and then there are the magic stones, the power stones, power stones, Zogobakir. They contain spiritual power that is significant mainly because of its origin, like Marilag, which is near Cape York, or Dawan, which is in northern Torres Strait, or from the deep sea, from the deep water, because in the deep water are the spirits that live in the sea. They have totemic significance. They were traded far and wide, and as Duncan will talk about probably later. The term might also be an origin, this kulau from Makassar. One type of stone is the goba. Goba are hill rocks from Dawan and other islands. They are magic because, in the case of Dawan, because it is a center for the snake, the Tabuaga, the snake clan ancestor. And so rocks that come from this island were used to make clubs and also rain magic stones and other things. In the case of Boigu, Ariu Misiri is rain magic, and Jerry Anau, who died a few years ago, his great-great-grandfather, Auda, took two stones from Dawan to Boigu to create rain.
Rod, sorry to interrupt, but I'm just conscious of
Yeah.
time. Would you mind
Yeah.
soonish?
Okay, yeah. So I'm just about finished. Okay. There is just one very quickly. The last one type of magic stone is an interesting Adiboya, which was born from, the story is born from a beautiful Kiwai girl, and the father was a moon. And it is one stone which came from Papua. Okay.